If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. Eme McAnum has worn many hats. She has certified fitness instructors, was a financial advisor, ran an assisted living facility, and even had a song on a top 100 country Billboard chart. But above all, she has lived life to the full and now has a critically acclaimed debut novel that captures some of her life experiences in Free Falling, a poignant and provocative work of senior romance and literary fiction. In this episode, we discuss life with Eme and how passion and romance are important to living a fulfilling life and aging well. Eme, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. You have quite a story to tell. Mother, grandmother, country music artist, author. Let's begin by having you tell a little bit about yourself.
Well, you just about told my whole story right there.
Well, I'm sure there's more to it than just a few words.
Well, there are some juicy parts, but I don't think we're supposed to talk about that. However, I am one of 9. I was born as one of 9 kids. Unfortunately, in the last year, I've lost a few siblings. But that big crew was part of how you figure out how to get to the top of the pile. And everybody seemed to have gotten their niche. And I came along and my niche was singing. So I became a singer-songwriter from the time I was very young. And I was blessed to enjoy a nice career. And like you said, I charted in the top 100. So that was kind of fun. And then after that, I got into fitness. I found I needed to focus on the family. So I kind of moved away from the music as my primary thing. Then I got into financial services and then senior services. So I've touched a lot of places in the world, but all along, I was writing lyrics and melodies in the margins of my life.
So tell us about your book, Free Falling.
Free Falling is a novel of senior romance. So now I've qualified to be a senior, and I looked around and I thought, good Lord, those books I used to read, they're all very young, lovely people. And I think that there is a life beyond when we're just young and lovely. We're still beautiful. It's just a different way. And when I was running the assisted living, which I did for 9.5 years, I learned to see the beauty in these people. And I also saw some pretty interesting romances.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I actually used to be an activities director at an assisted living. Yeah. And there's some spicy stuff that actually took place in those living corridors. And you're like, oh my goodness.
I hope those weren't the activities that you were trying to facilitate.
You'd go and like try and gather everyone up for the next activity. Okay, guys, we're going to do exercise, or we're going to do bingo, or hey, we got a crooner there. They're going to come in and they're going to sing to us. And you'd go knock on each door. And then when you knock and then open and you see a surprise and you're like, oh my goodness.
I had one couple who got together after dinner every night, and at 9:00 the guy would wander out down the hall looking blissful, and I thought, it isn't fair that he's getting more action than I am. I was just wrong. So I had to write about it. What you don't get, you write.
Well, I don't know if that answers my next question, which is why romance? I mean, we could have written about countless other topics. We had another recent writer on the podcast that's got gravitated toward mysteries, and you've gravitated towards romance. So why romance, other than the fact that you ain't getting any?
Well, maybe today I am.
we don't know.
Well, I became passionate about the idea that we need to live life to our last breath. And I saw that in the assisted living, where there were some families that thought they were just going to park their loved one and then they just kind of drift off into the ever after. But there's no reason you need to stop living your life. And there are a lot of people who feel they're old by the time they're 50. And yet 53% of the population is over 50. And God forbid you should turn 60 or 70. Heavens. So I decided I've always been passionate about everything I do. And some would say I'm a hardcore romantic. But I really liked the idea of building a story around the romantic potentials in the senior years. But if you did get a chance to read the book, you also noticed that I included a dementia storyline. And the idea of doing that, first of all, I didn't know my character was going to get dementia, but she did, because I had a friend who was talking to dementia every day. He was dying of Lewy body dementia. And I thought, if she can have romance with the cognitive decline, that would be a good illustration of how joy continues to our last breath.
That's really awesome.
Wow. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's deep.
Well, whether it be physical or cognitive, we don't have to check out and decide that we're not going to feel our sexy energies, whether it's with a partner or not. The idea of approaching life with that passion and that romance and the sensual energies, I think it's really important.
We often talk about the multiple dimensions of kind of really aging well, the spiritual, the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, and the social. I think, we're both probably young and, well, we're not probably young. He's younger than I am. I'm 60. But we tend not to think about, when we get older, that there's still a lot of those different drives that we have when we're younger, and nobody wants to talk about them. We don't want to know that grandma and grandpa are having sex.
Yeah, well, with the grace of God, they are.
Yeah.
And, sex might look different. Sex might look like flesh on flesh. It may not have the same turbulence, the vibrancy as you have in your youthful combinations. But people who are cuddling and holding one another and touching each other are able to enjoy a lot more energy in their life than people who don't have that.
That is beautiful.
Well, it's also true.
Yeah.
I never thought I would blush on an actual podcast before. I'm starting to blush a little bit. Okay.
That's why we don't do video.
Yeah, I know. Okay. Fly away. How does it speak to?
How did fly away?
Oh,
Corbin, I think you might have froze up.
Yeah,
Can you repeat that question so I can edit that a little bit better?
okay. Fly away. How does it speak to aging well?
Well, Fly Away is a song I actually wrote when my son was leaving the nest. Some would say that is the beginning of when you start to feel like you're aging. You look around your life and you go, okay, now this mission is done. And you try to find the potentials in the next step. But Fly Away was written as Alan was leaving home, and it's a metaphor of a bird leaving the nest. So interesting. I'm putting those lyrics in a book right now. I'm working with an artist, and I'm hoping I'm hoping to get him to get that done in time enough for graduation and wedding season, because it's really about the transitions of life. And in 2016, I did a performance event where I sculpted a mountain that was 10 feet high and 8 feet wide. And then I sculpted a nest, and I stood there and sang in it as Eagle Woman about the transitions of life. I sang the song and then I'd rant, and I did that for 18 hours that weekend.
Oh, wow.
I do nothing in a small way.
Well, we're going to put a link to not only, how people can find the book, but also to that song, because as I was kind of researching for today's interview, I found that on YouTube, and it's a very beautiful song. And it's like, this is so speaking to, this whole process of aging well and the transitions in life. And so it's a beautiful song. We thank you for writing it.
Thank you. I appreciate the fact that you enjoyed it. It has had a lot of meaning. Yeah. And whether, it's a weird thing that at 40 years old, people think they're old, and especially women. We practice feeling insufficient from the time we're 20. And I think it's a sin, because here I am at 71 years old, knowing I'm just beginning. I don't care how long I live. I want to live well. And so the idea that at 40, we're supposed to kind of step back and let younger people come forward, that's ridiculous. You're just starting to get some momentum then. And by the time you're in your 70s, I'm looking back on a life where I have learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes, and I did a lot of things right. And so why would I not write? Because I have a perspective. And so then I thought, well, I could write about how to choose assisted living, how to know if you're in a good environment, how to protect yourself, how to negotiate for yourself. And frankly, I bored myself. I decided, no, I'm not going to do that. Somebody else can be boring. I'm going to write a romance.
But you're probably writing about that in the process of writing about that,
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Inside the stories I write, you will see what I consider the wisdom of life. You've learned things. You bring those things to the stories of your life. And I've been fortunate that I have found some skills to do that.
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging. Well, I know you want to talk about the book, and we'll kind of get a little bit back to that as well. But as a country music fan from the 70s and the 80s, when country music was still great, I'd like to hear a little bit about your music and how it has fueled your passions 40 years later. And how has your music career and other careers that you have had led you to being a novelist who writes about romance and senior love stories?
Well, obviously, as a songwriter, it was all about romance. You're either getting in love or falling out of love. You're just doing it with rhymes. And, I still do that. When I'm working through the turbulence in my life, I pull out a notebook and it's amazing. I mean, it's all rhymey. I don't know that it's what they consider good poetry these days, because you're not supposed to rhyme if you're cool. So I'm not cool, but it's a way for me to process through the words that are coming through and put that emotion into those words. So in terms of understanding how did that end out in a novel, I've always been attracted to the words. And so that's how that turned into a novel. Now, going from singing it's hard. In 2016, when I sang for 18 hours, I thought, now am I going to sing again? I've done the weddings, the funerals, at the church thing. But I decided that that was time to try to put my voice into my writing. And so that's kind of where it is now. That's not to say I won't pull up, the voice again. But right now, that's the way I'm looking at it. And, in the 80s, the music business was interesting, and I was trying to be cool. I didn't know I was country. Truth be known, I went to LA. I got a producer and a promoter and kind of interviewed with people. And they said, well, honey, you're country. And I said, well, no. I mean, I had worked really hard to be cool. And they said, no, you need to have a backup audience, because in the world of music, you don't dive into the top 100. You find an audience that's going to support you through the ups and downs. So I conceded that, okay, I was country. And I went and got a cowboy hat and a vest that was, I looked country with my boots and the feather vest, and then I sang the songs. And the truth is, coming from Minnesota, I probably did lay on a melody with more of a country approach. I always thought it was more folk, but country turned into kind of folk country. And so I embraced it, and the audience embraced me, and it was a great experience.
Can't help but think of Barbara Mandrell's song, I Was Country When Country Wasn't Cool.
Yeah, exactly. I have so much admiration for the people that actually came up in country and stayed with country, and it is who they are. I had struggled with my identity, and I ended out in bars doing Shake Your Groove thing.
That's funny.
But, I also did Brown Eyes Blue and things like that. And the truth is, when I sang the country tunes, I think they were more real.
Definitely country was much, much more real in the 70s and 80s. I'm a little less of a country fan now than I was back then. I really loved the old stuff where it really did get to your heart. And as you kind of tell your story, I mean, I can see where, when we talk about purpose in life and the circumstances that lead us to where we're going, that your circumstances really kind of took you to writing these books now. I mean, you think of country music and writing, and I think I read somewhere on the internet that you have a habit of writing a song a day or lyrics
That's
a
what
day.
I was doing. I did that for 5 years. Now you want to hear the crazy part of the story?
Sure.
Okay. So I was writing a song a day for 5 years to improve my skills. And some days it would be 2 or 3 songs. Other days I'd be rolling into bed and go, oh no, I didn't write my song. So I'd roll over and write 3 verses and a chorus, because that was really my discipline. And I did become a better songwriter. In fact, Fly Away was from during those years. But so I had all of these notebooks accumulating under my bed because I had been journaling for years. I had been writing songs. So it became a burden of expectations. The shoulds were yelling at me. You should be making this into this, and you should be doing. And I just decided to let go of the burden of the words that were under my bed. And I had a big bonfire. I burned 8 grocery bags of writings when I was 52 years old. And I turned it into a ceremony, believing that if these words were meant to come back to me, they would. And I believe that they landed in free falling, that the words that I let go of that were an expectation, that I wasn't going to go to Nashville with those songs. I wasn't, I was beyond that being what I was supposed to do with those words. And so I created a freedom and opened a space so something new could come in.
I hope our listeners are listening to that story, because I think
That
we
is
all have
beautiful.
our pile of books under our bed that we need to kind of let go of. I try and write as much as possible. I've never really published anything other than a textbook for pathophysiology and exercise, but I keep writing, and one day it's going to lead to something. And I think in some cases it's led to this podcast. But and then for you, your story continued. You went to fitness, so you have that kind of focus on more what we would call kind of the preventative side of aging and trying to be healthy and aging well. And then that led you into senior living, and senior living led you to senior romance novels. So there's a purpose in life. Everything was done for its reasons. And
Well, it's easier to see it and when you're looking in the rearview mirror, because I admit I had an eclectic path, and I wanted to know who I was, but everything that I did felt real for me. When I sold my house, I hit the road for a year, and I was waiting for my artist loft to open up. I moved from a traditional life, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, cute house, not too far from the river, to now I'm in an artist loft overlooking the river and the Stone Arch Bridge in Minneapolis. But while I was waiting for it to get finished, I bought a car and hit the road for a year. Thought I'd figure out who I am. Where do I belong? And then I realized that I was just going to embrace the artist that I am. And I have some paintings that truthfully aren't very good, but I've had fun doing them. I do photography every day. I've posted a picture a day on Facebook for just about 8 years now. And I have a little following. It's about 17,000 people on Eme Spirit. That's EMESPIRIT. That's the page on Facebook. And of course, my emespirit.com is my website. So people want to learn more about that, they can go there. But again, it's disciplines. I do a picture every single day. And some days, there's some pretty good ones in there. And then there are other days that they're nice enough.
I think it's helpful for people to understand that every step along the way has taken us to where we're supposed to be right now. And we spend too much time either looking forward or looking back and having regrets, rather than looking back and saying, okay, this has been an opportunity. All of these challenges, everything that I've done right, done wrong, has got me to where I'm at right now. And I bet if I ask you this question, and I didn't intend to ask this question, but I'm going to ask you, if you can go back in time and change one thing in your life, what would you change?
That's a really good question, because that assumes that there was a place that I wasn't happy. Really, I wish I had found my one and only. I did get married and I got divorced when I was young, and I have a wonderful son. But then again, I don't know that I could be this wild. Maybe now I can settle down. Maybe not.
So you wouldn't change anything, probably, right?
Not really. Not
That's
really.
always the answer I see in people that are very content, happy, and I think successful. They look back, no matter how hard their life was, if they understand that it has brought them to the point that they are right now, and changing anything is going to deflect that trajectory ever so slightly, that who knows, you wouldn't have had your son, you wouldn't have written the book. If you had a successful marriage and, there's no thought about that longing for romance, you're not going to write it down.
That's right. It wouldn't become love songs, and it wouldn't become free falling.
Yeah.
I'm writing another book right now. I don't know if you had a chance to look through Free Falling, but there's a character, one of the men that Charlotte loves. Charlotte's the lead character. And now the book I'm writing is unraveling his story. And because I've had readers who've been having feelings about Brandon, but I believe free falling takes us from judgment to compassion. And Brandon, the character, has suffered under our judgments. So now I am looking to find out who he is and how he became who he is, and how has that impacted his life and the life of others. So I'm always hoping that my stories are almost like little parables, that underneath there's a reason for people being who they are. I don't think anybody is truly bad, but there are places where life doesn't work the way you would want it to. And if you get to the seeds of who people are, you understand better why things have gone the way they did.
Okay, I'm not a romance novel reader, but I'm going to have to get this book. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy it for my wife so that I can secretly kind of read it. And because I'm intrigued. I mean, I've never read a Harlequin romance. There's something about that Fabian looking guy on the cover that just turns me off, that I don't want to read this. That's for women. That's not for guys.
Ripping
But
those
I'm
shirts
very
off.
intrigued to read this book.
Well, it's been interesting as I've done book talks how many men have been excited about the story. And when I had my book edited, I had an editor out in San Francisco, and she came back. At first, the book was called The Dilemma. And she wrote and said, there is this amazing story within the story you wrote, and you can leave it as it is and you'll sell books, or you can peel back and let us focus on Charlotte. So I took out 26,000 words at that time, and I was nervous about it, but really she was right. So a lot of what fell on the floor at that time would be more traditional romance scenes. What I kept is more like a literary love story. Calling it romance is maybe wrong, because you do get the Harlequin thing in your mind.
Yeah.
But really what it is people loving, people who are older people, but they're loving each other. And the complications of loving in the later years are different from the complications in our youth.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. I want to get off of this interview as soon as possible and go on Amazon. No, we're not going to rush you out of here. But
I should also let you know, I did release another book later in the year called Free Falling Thoughts, and it's primarily photography, pictures that I took when I was hiking as I was up on the North Shore, writing the scenes that are clearly depicted in the book of Free Falling, a novel of senior romance.
Well, I expect Free Falling to be a whole series of senior love stories. I'm not going to say romance novels.
I like the love stories. Unfortunately, when you call it romance, then you can line it up with the biggest selling books in the world, because romance is the biggest seller. But I wonder how many romance books really have gotten more sophisticated than the trope. There is a pattern you're supposed to follow when you write these books. They're supposed to kiss by this date. There's, you know what I mean? And yeah, mine didn't quite go that way.
You're a rebel.
Love story. Yeah, I'm a rebel. What the heck? And I have sold a number of books. Did you know that most books only sell 250 books in the first year?
Yeah, not much.
It's terrible. 98% of the books, whether big or little publishers, it's preposterous. And I'm closer to 1,200 now, but you think you're going to do more, and maybe because we're visiting, I will sell more, because I want your friends to come and check out Free Falling, the novel of senior romance.
Well, I think it's something that really points people in the direction of aging well. So we will definitely promote your book.
Oh, I'm so glad you'll do that. We'll have to make sure you have all the links and everything.
We will. Yeah, we'll put that all in the description notes.
This is a great idea to have a dedicated time about aging well. And there's so many different ways we can do that, but it really takes all of them to
Well, that's
get.
our approach, is to try and kind of hit all those different corners of aging well and make it, again, proactive as opposed to reactive when it comes to aging well. Because we can all talk about all we have to, how to get to the doctor and what kind of pills we should be taking for our prostates. But, that's not aging well. That's just kind of trying to survive the later years of life. And we want that to be as fulfilling and exciting as possible. And, you know, getting sexy is going to be part of that. So
That's part of it. I always say I ran a marathon in my youth, and I don't expect at this age, although there are those who do, but I don't expect that I need to run a marathon in order to be living a good life. But I do like to focus on getting to 10,000 steps a day. And I love to hike. And yet I also understand I'm blessed that my body is this healthy and that I can do that.
Well said. So speaking of aging well and steamy romance novels and that aspect of being sexy as we age, what makes aging sexy?
Well, you become less self-conscious in many ways. I think younger women, especially, and I think there's an element of this for men, where there's so much focus on who you are and how you show up in the world that it almost gets in the way of our true sexiness. And then as we get older and we go over the hump where you think, oh no, now it's all over. When you get to the other side of that, you realize that the joy is accepting who you are now and being able to enjoy a sexy connection with somebody who's in who they are now. I don't expect the same thing from my men as I did in my youth. And any good guy's not expecting a woman to be the kind of woman he had when he was young.
good answer. So, okay, I'm going to ask you the question we ask of all our guests. What are you doing personally to age well? And I know you've touched on this a little bit, but what are you doing personally to age well?
Well, I work out. I get in nature. That is more important to me than lifting weights, but we do have a fitness center and I go and lift weights not as often as I should. And I eat well. Mostly I try to keep a good attitude. I, I work on morning meditation, preparing myself to hit the day with gratitude. And that helps me see whatever's crossing my path in a different way.
We actually kind of have a theme on this show where we spell gratitude with two T's, the attitude of gratitude.
Oh, I like
Yeah.
that. I like that.
So you gave us an opportunity to plug that and promote that. But yeah, attitude
That's
with two T's.
perfect.
And that sounds like what you're doing. So that's great.
So I know you mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but I wanted to give our listeners another opportunity to find your book. So where can our listeners find you, or about your book or your photography, or whatever the case may be, if they're interested in seeking more information about you? Do you have a website or social media where they can plug in and get to know you a little better?
Yep, I sure do. I have a website, emespirit.com. Eme is not Amy. It is EMESPIRIT.com. And you can get information about the books and photography. If you want to be a part of the 17,000 people following me on Facebook, that's on Eme Spirit on Facebook. And I have a later presence on Instagram. I probably should focus on that, but I put my picture there every day. I figure If it's meant to be, it'll grow more. But those are the places where you can find information about me. And of course, if you want to order the books, they're available at any bookseller. They may not have them on the shelf. I wish they would, but they can definitely order them.
And you're on Amazon probably as well, I would assume.
Yeah, actually, if you put in your search engine freefallingnovel.com, that takes you right to the Amazon page. And I
Nice.
did an audiobook also. Leave it to me, I just got a little restless. And so it's available as an ebook and audiobook, and of course, as a paperback.
And when's the movie coming out?
I don't know. I'm really looking forward to it, though. It would be a real pretty movie because of the panoramic views that I've described up on the North Shore of Minnesota.
You cast yourself as Charlotte?
Oh, heavens, no, I'm too old. Charlotte starts out at age 60, and the end of her story is at 75. So when I was writing it, I thought, oh, maybe Susan Sarandon, because I did the light skin and the red hair only because it's easy for me to write that way. Not surprisingly, as I know about sunburn. But but it's tricky. Who would be the person who would best be Charlotte? It's got to cover some age range. The first scene of the book, the beginning of the book she leads with her breasts as she enters the lobby. No one can tell her she isn't competent and attractive. And she's 75 with dementia at that moment.
Okay.
Inspired by somebody who lived at the assisted living, by the way.
Yeah, I'm really more anxious to read the book now, and I'll see what visual kind of comes up as I read about Charlotte. So,
I think you'll love Charlotte.
yeah.
Yeah, I think Charlotte's pretty lovable.
Nice.
She's an interesting character.
Sigourney, I think that would be a good character to play the role.
Who?
Sigourney Weaver.
Oh, she would be good.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, she would be good. Julianne Moore would also be good, but she did Still Alice. Are you familiar with that movie about a woman who got early Alzheimer's? And so, although I think she could do a real good job, it might be confusing to cover both of the dementia stories. She might be locked in on that.
Yeah. She don't want to get typecast as somebody with dementia either.
No, probably not.
There's a lot of great actresses out there. How about Reba McEntire?
She could, if she could drop the twang. Do you think she could do that?
I think she could. I've seen her act. She's pretty good actress.
If she could clarify her voice more. See, Charlotte runs a 5-star hotel, so she's very sophisticated, very detail oriented. And so we need somebody who can bring that presence into the character, but she could.
I'm just thinking of those redheads.
Well, anybody can dye their hair, though.
Yeah, true.
Don't get too locked in on that.
Some reason Molly Ringwald is coming to mind too.
Yeah, Molly Ringwald.
She was a redhead for sure.
What about Sally Fields?
Sally Fields too old.
I
hate to say that. I mean, that sounds really, really bad.
I hate to say it too, because I am against ageism. There are characters, though, that you need to put into the place that can effectively carry them.
Yeah.
Because
you'd have to play young. It's a lot easier for a younger actress to play old, but it's a little bit harder to kind of really pull down the age. And Sally Field, I'm not sure of her age. Is she in her 80s?
Older than I am, I know.
Yeah. I mean, phenomenal actress and still a beautiful woman. So,
yeah, I'm thinking somebody could be even 67 or 68, a well-preserved version,
Mhm.
and then be able to pull off the 60 person and yet be effective in the later years.
I know there's a few of those out there. Now my mind is spinning, and podcast will be 2 hours long as we sit here
Yeah,
casting
that's
a
right.
movie.
Well,
But we want to make sure that some listener decides we're going to write a screenplay for this, and we're going to get this on the big screen. So
There we go.
Well, I would love that. Yeah, I sat next to Jessica Lange at a restaurant on the North Shore. She was actually at the booth behind me. And shy that I am, I just approached her coming back from the restroom, told her how incredible she was and that I was writing a story for her. Her friend said, "How many books do you have published?" This will be the first one. So I'm not sure she's eager to jump in, but maybe she could pull it off.
You never know. There might be some unknown actress out there too that this would be her launch into her career.
Yeah, that would be nice. It would be great to give somebody an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating interview. I wish we could just kind of keep going on because you have so much to tell. Maybe we'll bring you back when the next novel is out or as the movie is ready to hit the screen. Like I said, I'm not quite sure I'm ready for the romance novels, but I'm going to get it and I'm going to read it, and I'll get my wife to read it under the guise that, that's why I'm buying the book. And I'm sure many of our listeners will be excited to read the book Free Falling and hopefully see the movie someday. So we've enjoyed the conversation. Is there anything we've missed that you want to have any final words for our listeners?
Just go to emespirit.com, look for Free Falling, a novel of senior romance and free falling thoughts as photography. But the most important part isn't about buying the book as much as that's kind of my job right now. But I just want people to know that we need to live joy to our last breath. So let's just stay focused on keeping joy.
Eme, thank you so much for your time. This has been an amazing podcast. At one point, I was blushing, but it's been super, super entertaining. And I'm sure our listeners were just as entertained. And we appreciate you keeping your time. And as always, keep aging well.
I
Aging
will
well.
do that. To the best of my ability, I'll be doing that. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.